tried to outgrow their biggest hit, and the crowd never moved on.
But I'm a creep.
Another wrote something personal and dark, only to watch the world turn it into something else. Once they hit, the outcome was out of the band's hands. Tonight, we're breaking down 11 rock songs bands couldn't escape, from the classic rock era to a band that knew the trap and still couldn't avoid it. Number 11. This one wasn't supposed to matter this much. It came together at the very end, almost by accident. Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me. Pour Some Sugar on Me was written at the tail end of the Hysteria sessions, after years of overdubs and rewrites had worn the band down. The album's running order was essentially set. Bags were being packed at Whistle Lord Studios in the Netherlands. While killing time in the control room, Joe Elliott picked up an acoustic guitar and sang a rough hook. Mutt Lange was right there. He heard it immediately and pushed to build it out. What felt like a throwaway moment forced the record back open. Released as a U.S. single in 1988, it spent 2 weeks at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and drove Hysteria into full saturation. MTV, radio, arenas. Over time, it became the moment audiences waited for. Set lists bent around it. Leaving it out stopped being an option. Not because the band lacked other hits, but because expectation had already taken control. Number 10. It started as something small, just a riff you mess with when nobody's keeping score. Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child O' Mine. Slash never hated that intro, he just never took it seriously. He said the idea that it began as a joke or a warm-up got exaggerated over time. It was simply him messing around, putting notes together until a melody stuck. He didn't see it as the foundation of a song, let alone something that would define him. Once Izzy Stradlin started laying chords behind it, Axl Rose heard an opening. Lyrics followed, and what sounded like a stray guitar figure suddenly had structure. Released as a U.S. single in June 1988, Sweet Child O' Mine became Guns N' Roses' first and only number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. After that, the riff stopped being optional. Crowds didn't wait to see if it would show up, they waited to hear when. Number 9. They used to stretch songs past the 10-minute mark. Then one chorus changed what people listened for. Genesis, Invisible Touch, 1986. By 1986, Genesis had already lived several lives. Peter Gabriel was gone. Steve Hackett was gone. The Long Suites were no longer the headline. Invisible Touch came out of the way Genesis wrote then. A jam at the farm in Surrey. A drum machine pulse. Mike Rutherford landing on a percussive, clipped guitar figure that locked to it. Phil Collins leaning into a hook almost casually, without overthinking it. America heard a single. The song hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July 1986. The only time Genesis ever reached the top. MTV ran it hard, radio followed. The band didn't disown the song, but it reset the terms. After that, Genesis meant polish first, hooks first, and anything older started getting treated like a footnote. Number 8. They needed a hit. and this is the one that kept the lights on. Cheap Trick, The Flame.
I'm going crazy, I'm losing sleep.
By the late 80s, Cheap Trick were fighting for airplay. Records were coming out, but radio wasn't biting. Epic wanted a reset, which meant outside material. The Flame, written by Bob Mitchell and Nick Graham, arrived as a polished demo that had already made the rounds. Rick Nielsen's reaction was immediate and visceral. He hated the idea of an outside power ballad.
You were the first, you'll be the last.
Producer Richie Zito saw something else. He built the track piece by piece, starting with a stripped, intimate vocal from Robin Zander, cut quickly, using a softer, more breathy approach than his usual roar, to prove the song could live inside the band's voice. Released in 1988, The Flame hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July, giving Cheap Trick their only chart topper. It kept them on pop radio, but it didn't sound like the band behind Heaven Tonight. And from that point on, every conversation about Cheap Trick passed through this song first.
Going crazy, I'm losing sleep.
Number 7. This one paid the bills, but it never sounded like their voice. Heart. All I Want to Do Is Make Love to You. By 1990, Heart were deep into their second act. The 80s had reshaped them into a radio force again, built around outside writers and high-gloss production. This song came straight out of that system. It was written by Mutt Lange, not the Wilson sisters, and it wasn't even new.
I didn't ask him his name.
It had been recorded years earlier in another form. Producer Richie Zito brought it to life for pop radio, polished and ready. On the charts, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. The single climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks, becoming Heart's biggest hit of the 90s. Almost immediately, Ann Wilson made her distance clear. She's spoken openly about hating the lyrics and the storyline, not the success, but the voice it put in her mouth. Radio locked in, and for many listeners, this became the shorthand for late-era Heart, even as the band tried to steer the conversation somewhere else.
You can imagine his surprise.
Number 6. It was the hit that opened every door, and the one Morrison kept pushing back against. The Doors, Light My Fire.
Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my.
When Light My Fire hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1967, it turned the Doors from a volatile club band into a national act. The song was written principally by guitarist Robbie Krieger, but the single that conquered radio wasn't the long album version. Elektra wanted a hit, and producer Paul A. Rothchild cut it down hard.
And our love become a funeral pyre. Come on, baby, light my.
The long instrumental middle vanished. AM radio got a version built to fit between commercials. Jim Morrison didn't turn on the song itself. He pushed back against what it was being turned into. On television, he bristled at the cleaned-up presentation, most famously when he refused to censor the word higher on The Ed Sullivan Show.
Girl, we couldn't get much higher.
On stage, the band stretched it back out. Longer solos, slower burns, performances that leaned away from polish. They kept playing it, and he kept trying to pull it back into something looser, darker, less polite.
Come on, baby, light my fire. I just said that.
Number 5. It was meant as a warning. Most people heard it as an invitation. Pink Floyd, Money. When The Dark Side of the Moon landed in 1973, it was built to be heard as a whole. But Money broke away from the suite, a 7-count groove driven by bite and sarcasm, not celebration. Roger Waters wrote it as a critique, greed, consumption, the rot underneath success. The loop of clinking coins and cash registers wasn't decoration. It was the point turned into rhythm. Radio heard something else. Released as a single, Money became Pink Floyd's first major American hit and a common entry point for new listeners. The one-track stations could pull out of context and play on its own. The irony was hard to miss, an anti-greed song turning into the band's most marketable hook. For a lot of people, it was the first thing they heard before the album's ideas ever landed. And once that framing set in, it didn't loosen its grip.
I'm alright, yeah, keep your hands off of my stack.
Number 4. You've heard it at weddings, and that's the problem. The Police, Every Breath You Take, 1983.
Every breath you take, and every move you.
Sting wrote Every Breath You Take from a dark place. Possession, surveillance, the feeling of someone watching, not loving. He later called it a nasty little song, jealous, unsettling, and not romantic in the slightest. Recorded at Air Studios in Montserrat and released as a single in May 1983, it went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 8 weeks. It became Synchronicity's defining single, and then it escaped the album entirely.
Game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you.
The world heard Reassurance, where he meant control. Sting didn't regret the song. What unsettled him was the way it was received. A warning became a promise, and once that version settled in, there was no correcting it. The band kept playing it, the royalties piled up, and for decades, this was the song people reached for first. Not because it said what the band intended, but because it said what listeners wanted it to be.
Every vow you break.
Number 3. This one didn't fade. It turned into something he couldn't bring himself to touch. Creedence Clearwater Revival, Proud Mary. Proud Mary arrived early in 1969, written by John Fogerty as Creedence Clearwater Revival was hitting full stride. Tight songwriting, no excess, a song built to move. It became the record that broke the band wide open. The song quickly took on a life beyond Creedence. Major covers followed, carrying it far past its original context. At the same time, Fogerty's relationship with his own catalog began to fracture. As ownership battles hardened over the years, he grew increasingly estranged from the Creedence recordings he'd written.
Pumped a lot of pain down in New Orleans.
The fallout wasn't symbolic. It changed how he behaved. For long stretches, Fogerty couldn't bring himself to touch Proud Mary on stage. The song kept circulating anyway. Other voices carried it forward. And one of the most recognizable pieces of American rock became something its author could barely approach.
Bet you gonna find some people who live.
Number 2. They stopped playing it. That didn't help. Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven.
And she's buying a stairway to heaven.
Stairway to Heaven was never released as a U.S. single, but by 1971, that didn't matter. FM radio carried it everywhere. 8 minutes, no chorus. A slow build that felt almost ceremonial. It became unavoidable without ever being pushed the usual way. By the mid-70s, Robert Plant was already weary of it. He said more than once the lyrics stopped feeling connected to who he was. After John Bonham's death in 1980 and the breakup, Zeppelin stopped performing it as a band. The silence didn't shrink it.
A tree by the brook, there's a songbird.
Radio kept it alive. Classic rock culture sealed it in place. And when Zeppelin reunited on rare occasions, Stairway wasn't guaranteed, but it still surfaced because the song had grown larger than any set list. Plant has even told a story, half joking, about pledging money to a station on the condition they'd stop playing it. They stepped away. The song didn't. Number 1. They knew exactly what could happen. It happened anyway. Radiohead, Creep.
But I'm a creep.
Creep arrived in 1992, and almost immediately Radiohead felt the tension. It wasn't a manifesto, it was exposed, self-loathing, smaller than where they wanted to go. A first impression that didn't feel like a destination. Then it took off, especially after its re-release the following year. The song became their breakthrough and just as quickly narrowed the conversation. In the US especially, it turned into the doorway everyone used to enter the band.
I wish I was special.
One song, one mood, one version of who Radiohead were supposed to be. They pushed back. Tom York grew openly frustrated, pulling it from set lists for long stretches in the 90s. That didn't work. Audiences kept asking for it. Radio never let it fade. Even as the band moved toward denser, stranger ground, Creep stayed put. The reference point that followed them no matter how far they traveled past it. Once a song gets bigger than the band, it never really lets go. Which one did you watch happen in real time?